Yes, welcome in. Badgers back from Alabama. It didn't go well, but Jesse had a good time, right?
I had a decent time, got in, got out, no major hurdles. The 3-hour game was less than ideal, but
Yeah,
it was a bucket list
that's
opportunity to be down there.
that's what I was going to ask, right? It's the game wasn't great, but the opportunity to go to a historic place like that and a historic program in their home field, you don't get too many opportunities like that.
No, I figure I'll probably never be back there. Certainly in a capacity covering Wisconsin, I wouldn't expect this matchup to be scheduled again. Least of all in a home and home type situation. So, yeah, I mean, I put it on Twitter. I think I mentioned it before. Like when the game was scheduled 6 years ago, I thought, I hope I'm still covering the team just so I can see what that atmosphere and that experience is like. And didn't expect Wisconsin to win, but at least got to see it.
Absolutely. And you get an opportunity later this year too, right? Autzen Stadium. Even though that obviously in the Big Ten, you may have an opportunity to do that more than once. I guess we'll see. But the game itself, not great. We'll get to it all. Before we do, as always, for those listening, we have a podcast, or I should say we have a YouTube channel where you can watch all of our episodes and player interviews and all that good stuff. So check that out, the Camp YouTube page. Give us a follow. It certainly helps out the show. And also BadgerConnect.com. Jesse's work up there. You get all the stuff that you could potentially want from him, and including his story from Alabama that we are going to talk about here in a little bit. But ton of content coming, both football, basketball, volleyball you've done. So a lot of good stuff up there at BadgerConnect.com. Go check it out. All right. So last year when they went down to Iowa, we do our what went right, what went wrong. And the what went right down at Iowa was quite short. And I got a question saying, would this one be shorter or longer? And I actually think that they were better on Saturday than they certainly were last year at Iowa. But that's not really a high bar to get over. But let's go with what went right to start out the show here.
The thing I've heard in most positively, I think, from fans is that the run defense did its job. There were not a lot of big plays in the run. I think Alabama averaged was 3.3 yards per carry. Yeah, 3.3 yards, 72 total yards on 22 carries. It's just, this is one of those caveats of hard for me to get all that excited about it when Ty Simpson threw for 382 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and was darn near perfect. So when I talked to Mike Tressel last week, he said the two big areas of emphasis were stop the run and stop the explosiveness on the outside with those wide receivers. They were able to do one. It just doesn't mean a whole lot when you can't do the other. So if you are looking for positives, yes, nice, sound run defense. Alabama really didn't need it, though.
Yeah, and it just felt like they were going back to pass every single down, didn't it? Everything was, some of it was play action. They certainly were working on their play action game and had some success in that. But yeah, they just didn't have any real reason to run. Why run when you can pass, right?
They passed on 4th and 2 on the first drive at their own 46.
Yeah. So again, we'll get to the negative aspect of it. The two big plays that they had that you mentioned in your story, which I think certainly stands out, was Vinny Anthony's kickoff return coming after that long touchdown to Ryan Williams to open the second half for Alabama. And by long, I mean just running a lot, not actually long pass. But that opened up, and he hit it hard. And I feel like he's one of the better kick returners that they've had. I just think he's just got a great feel for it. He doesn't get as many opportunities to kick off, or I should say get kick returns, because a lot of teams are just kicking the ball in the end zone these days. But I certainly thought that stood out, and that was a great play by him. And then to close the game with Danny O'Neal hitting Jade Ballard for that, was it 41-yard touchdown pass? And he's got a couple of long touchdowns here in the first couple of weeks. The one was wide open. That one was a really nice catch and a really nice play by both Danny and by Jaden to hook up there. And maybe that's a sign of some of the stuff that maybe they'll be able to do going forward. There were some misses on some big plays as well, but those two plays certainly stood out for me as well.
And the 4th down stop on the first series defensively. I mean, in the moment, I thought, I cannot believe Alabama is doing this. And yet over the course of the game, you realize exactly why they were, because there is a shall we say, lack of respect for Wisconsin and the ability to move the ball offensively, or the fact that they could consistently stop Alabama defensively. But in the moment, that first series, it's like, all right, Wisconsin's got the ball in Alabama territory before an interception. So that was a big moment. But those types of things were few and far between because the defense immediately gave up 5 consecutive touchdowns.
I loved the play by Christian Allegro, though, that came right before Mason Reiger's late hit, which was just a backbreaker. But again, we'll get to that stuff. But the play by Christian Allegro coming up on the blitz and the running back stepping up and him just absolutely destroying him and finishing off the sack of Ty Simpson was, I think, one of the highlight defensive plays of the day by far. He was on the tracks, and Christian Allegro was coming through, and it didn't go well. Did not go well for the running back. He just put him on the ground and got to the quarterback. I thought that was a really, really nice play by him as well. So, anything else you want to hit on the what went right category at all?
That's it. Maybe we set a record, but that's it.
I don't think we set a record. The Iowa game, I think, set a record. I think we did I think there was a who was the touchdown? Who was number 4 last year? Williams.
CJ Williams.
CJ Williams. Thank you. He had a great touchdown catch in that game, and I think that was the extent of the what went right for that one. So certainly 5 minutes or 4 minutes here spent on what went right, I think is appropriate. All right, what went wrong? And we can start in a number of places, but I want to start with, it felt a lot like last year's game in that Wisconsin needed to play a perfect game to win. They needed to not make mistakes. They needed not to shoot themselves in the foot. They needed not to have costly penalties. They needed not to turn the ball over. And then they went out and did the absolute exact thing. And it was very similar to last year, right? So you get that stop, right? And then the interception thrown right to a safety. I saw that play plenty of times last year by the quarterback that was wearing 18 last year. Just a really, really poor play. You can credit the safety if you want, but I'm gonna credit the guy who was staring down his receiver that allowed the safety to go and know exactly where the ball was going, and for him not to see him, very, very tough look. But then Alabama goes down and scores a touchdown. Then you get a big boy play from Christian Allegro and the stupid play by Mason Reiger, and next play is a touchdown. You get illegal hands to a face on the next drive, 96-yard, or what was it, 97, 98-yard drive the other way, touchdown. It's 21-0. All those plays set up by Wisconsin kicking them on, or I should say shooting themselves in the foot. So it felt very much like last year.
So many mistakes. That's how I framed the story. It's, of course, you can't play perfect football, but we all knew it was going to take as close to perfect as Wisconsin could muster to give themselves a chance, which says a lot about perhaps where Wisconsin is. But like a lot of teams would have trouble going into Alabama and winning. And yet, first series offensively, you get a first down, good pass to Chris Brooks. Tretch Cahoon is called for a pick play. It's offensive pass interference, and then you end up having to punt. It's just, you can forgive smaller things like that. I'm just saying every drive, it felt like something was adding up. You've got the critical interception, and Danny talked about it afterward that he had to do a better job of this, making sure the safety wasn't right there in the middle, that he committed more to the other guy, but like he dropped right back there. He threw it right to him. Obviously you didn't see him. And then it gives Alabama momentum. Alabama's got a third down situation. Boom. Ty Simpson, it's a 24-yard pass play. And that kind of sparks them, but you have 2 interceptions. You have injuries along the offensive line, and I get you can't control that. Defensively, you have that great first series, and then, like I said, you give up 5 straight drives with touchdowns. The roughing the passer call just is a killer, and I know there were some people said like, well, that's a pretty soft call, but like you can't put yourself in that position, so I just, all those things added up, and I mean, again, like I don't even know kind of how to break it down. Offensively, like the O-line is just, it's a mess. And the injuries don't help. I mean, Jake Renfro, God bless him for trying to fight through that. You can see how hobbled he is. He comes out because he goes down. They put in Kerry Kadonko. He's in for 1 snap. He immediately gives up a sack. And Luke Fickell said after the game that Kadonko was dealing with some sort of injury, and then they moved on from him. But like, it was 1 snap. And then you got your third string center, Ryan Corey, in there. But then you go back to Renfro in the second half, and he can barely move. You got those 2 redshirt freshmen on the right side. And it's interesting because the post-game press conference, it's really our only opportunity to get a like vibe check, right? And you don't get that much time with them. And I know we'll get to the things Luke Fickell said afterward. I was struck by Riley Mallman was the only one who came out there and was pissed off. And I thought that was a rare window into how he's feeling right now, because usually they're bringing in guys who are going to be super positive. They're veteran guys. They're putting up kind of a brave face. And he talked about how basically if this continues, and he was referring more to the slow starts, but also how problematic it was for the O-line. He's like, it's going to be a disaster of a season. And there are other guys where it feels like, and I'm inferring here, right? This is not something they're saying directly, but it almost feels like guys are accepting of where Wisconsin is or the loss. And that's not to say they don't want to perform better, but when you factor in, like, there's a single guy who played in that game who was a part of a team that was where Wisconsin beat a ranked team, it's just like, this is kind of the expected result. And it's like, we'll look at it and we'll get better. And it's all sort of platitudes. It just feels like, I don't know, maybe that's not fair, but it sort of feels like they're accepting of what's happening right now. Or maybe they just never expected to beat Alabama and realize there are other games that are going to matter more. But nothing really went right is kind of the best way to put it.
Who gave you that vibe?
Guys who are accepting of it?
Yeah.
You know, again, maybe that's not fair because they're putting on a positive face, but I think it has to start with Luke Fickell talking about wanting to carry himself with positivity. And he was clear. He said, we are not going to accept this loss. We're, going to tear it apart. I just think it's like, you're asked, well, how hard is that? And he's like, it's very challenging, but I don't know where else to go. Like that is alarming, I think, when you have a coach that it feels like just doesn't have any answers, certainly hasn't had the answers to this point, and has tried everything. We know how notoriously fierce he is as a competitor, how tough he can be on the players. And now you're at a point where it's like, I'm going to change my tactic here because I don't have any answers. So I think it starts there.
Yeah. I look at the idea of trying to stay positive is because things went negative so quickly last year. And this was something that we talked about with Jake Renfro out in Las Vegas, was the idea of being positive to keep the guys up, because it is only 3 games into the season. You can't be talking about how horrible you are, and you need, because guys are not going to be able to get going the other way if it's just negative 24/7. And after that game, it's pretty much just negative 24/7, but you can't, because of how poorly they moved on from games last year. I understand the idea of trying to be positive about some of the stuff that happened, even though you look at it and there wasn't a lot of things to be positive about. I understand the mentality that he's trying to say. I wouldn't have said, I don't know what else to do. That's probably not something you want to hear from your coach in a post-game press conference. But I understand the idea of trying to be positive, because you have 9 more games to play. As you illustrated, or as you noted in your story, 5 of the next 7 are against teams in the top 25 of the AP poll. 3 of them are currently in the top 10. So you have to be at least somewhat positive, or it goes down the drain just like it did last year. So I'm interested in seeing how they bounce back and how they react to that ass whooping that they took by Alabama when they bring Maryland to Camp Randall on Saturday, because they need to come out with their hair on fire and give some of the juice and give that some of that vibe that we saw at times against Middle Tennessee State, and didn't see a ton against Alabama because there's not a lot that was going right. But I understand the idea behind being positive. I just, the way it was illustrated probably could have been better.
Luke talked about, I think this was a question I asked him, because, he spent a lot of the offseason talking about how he feels like they're in a better place, though less talk, more action. We know that, but do you, what makes you feel that way in this moment? He talked about this idea of, what he said this a lot, competitive maturity, but he was referencing himself by saying, I need to understand kind of what you're talking about. It's a long season. I think this also speaks to something he addressed way back in February when he was meeting with players initially, being realistic about where you are as a program. Realistically, even if you put all your effort into beating Alabama, highly unlikely you're going to pull that off. And the result ended up being pretty much what we all thought it was going to be. You may not like how it happened, that you didn't give yourself a realistic chance, but like he was handcuffed to some degree by the fact this game was scheduled before he was here, when Wisconsin never would have otherwise scheduled it, when you know how difficult the road is ahead. So I can understand that idea, because like he said, the season starts now. And some people are like, well, what do you mean you're 3 games into the season? The Big Ten season, where there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of time this offseason spent on getting back to kind of where you've been. Can you beat Iowa, Minnesota? All of a sudden, this Maryland game is one of the biggest games on the schedule. And I think we thought it was going to go this way, because you could be 3-1 going into bye, closing out September, where you at least feel like you're getting back to where you want to be. And maybe that's just a mask because you haven't played anybody. But I thought it was an interesting change tactic, I think, from Luke after the game. But I don't know. I just don't know what to think, because it's been so long since Wisconsin not only has won one of these, but just how many games have been competitive or not competitive. Yeah, they were in it with Penn State and Oregon. It's funny because I was thinking, like, this isn't even probably among the top 5 worst losses we've seen under Luke Fickell. And they lost 38-14. So that says a lot too about where they've been.
Yes. What did you pick for their score?
35-14.
I went 42-14.
Correct.
So,
it's
so
exactly
the game,
what we thought.
Yes. So when we sit here and talk about it, that's exactly what it is. It doesn't make it better for Wisconsin that it went exactly the way we thought it would. It means that they have not made the strides that we thought that they were going to be able to make, or we were looking for them to make, I should say. Not that we thought they were going to make, that they were looking to make after a season where it was so bad in the final 5, or the final 2 games in the Iowa game. The other 2 games, they fought their asses off and were right there and had a chance to win those games. And if they had won one of those, maybe we're looking at this differently. But as you said, they have failed every time they've been put into a test against a good opponent. And that was the case in 2022 as well. It's not like this has only been a Luke Fickell thing. They went down to Ohio State, and Ohio State, I don't think the ball hit the ground once in the first half with CJ Stroud and company down there. So it's not like they haven't gotten hammered like this before, but this is year 3. This is year 3. And you're hoping, if you're a fan, that they are making some strides to get closer to being competitive in a game like this. And they just weren't, and they haven't. And that has to be so frustrating for fans. But I don't know what else right now Wisconsin can do except put on a positive face and try and move forward and try and put this behind them, because they have so many challenges ahead, and they have so many, we talk about it as challenges, they have so many opportunities ahead to change the narrative about what they are and where they're going. But right now the narrative is exactly what it's been for the last 2+ years now, and that is Luke Fickell may not be the answer.
If you're looking for a silver lining, and this is really searching, but it's that this is not, and never was really, the measuring stick game for Wisconsin, because they're not on that level. Alabama is so much more talented, and that doesn't excuse how badly Wisconsin lost. But if you're looking for that positive, it's the
Go ahead,
you can lose. Well, I'm just saying, like, you can lose this game, and you'll look back at the season, if they beat Iowa and Minnesota and end up in a bowl, and you'll say, like, that feels like progress. Again, I'm not excusing what happened. And I would like to point out, since we're in the what went wrong section, the single play to me that illustrated where Wisconsin is, where Alabama is, why there is this cavernous gap, is the 75-yard double reverse screen pass to Ryan Williams, where the offensive line, I mean, the whole offensive line is out there just knocking dudes 10 yards backwards, and other defenders are falling down. And again, I know a game is more than one play, but to me, that kind of said everything about the difference between these two teams. But not the true measuring stick, even if it is tremendously disappointing.
2 things. That was a ridiculous play. Wisconsin tried to run it themselves.
I know. Daniel Neal had to jump past it just to get one off.
Yeah. There was also a blatant hold on the play. And I got crushed. A lot of people saying, "Oh, if that play mattered," I'm like, no, it didn't matter. Alabama probably would have scored a few plays later. I'm not saying it. It's okay to point out a blatant missed call on a 75-yard touchdown. when the tight end has the guy on the outside of his shoulder pads and is holding on and won't let him go as the guy's trying to get loose to make a potential tackle, and he can't get loose, and he gets pushed into the ground or tackled into the ground, that's a hold. I don't care what anybody says. I got a lot of people say, "Oh, that's just a good play." No, it's not. His hands were on the outside. Should have been a hold. Should have been called. Doesn't matter. Horrible play for Wisconsin. And two, you talk about it as not a measuring stick. Luke Fickell called it a measuring stick in his post. You posted the clip, or you posted his opening statement, right? He said, "We know this was a measuring stick. We're not measuring up to where we want to be or expect to be, but there's a long way to go." So was it a measuring stick or not a measuring stick?
I'm saying realistically, when you look at where Wisconsin is and who you think they need to beat to feel like you're in a better place, this was never that. But every time they play a ranked opponent is one of those opportunities. I'm saying if you're looking for a silver lining, you have to be realistic about where Wisconsin is as a program and say this was not realistic. Go beat Iowa. Go beat the crap out of Maryland. Go beat Minnesota. But yeah, of course, it's a failure on all levels to go out there and you're down 28-0 before you do anything.
I think it's a measuring stick of progress, as opposed to maybe it's semantics here a little bit in terms of what we think measuring stick means or measuring stick game means. But it was a measuring stick in terms of have they made progress. I think that's something that we talked about going into the game. What does success look like? Can they potentially make this a game in the second half? That would be progress over last year. We could see movement in the right direction. And I don't know that we've seen movement in the right direction. That, I guess, is to me when I'm thinking measuring stick, I would call it that. Just, again, however you want to frame it, right?
That's fair. And I put that in the story. Like, the best Wisconsin could have hoped for was to get to the second half and give yourself a chance, which speaks to where Wisconsin is right now. And the Badgers couldn't even do that.
Correct. And there is plenty of season left. There were a lot of people that took offense to Luke Fickell's the season starts now thing. Not offense, but we're pissed off about it. Like, no, it started 3 weeks ago. Where you been? But you think he means Big Ten season and that type of stuff, right?
I'm not going to read further into it than that. He's not dismissing the first 3 games. They obviously every week put their effort into winning, but you have to realize, again, realistically, what did you think was going to happen against Alabama? And now what kind of opportunity do you have moving forward where, yeah, you got all these ranked opponents, but these are the ones that you kind of gear up for every year because you're playing them every year. I know they played Alabama a year ago and it was a big deal, but I don't look at it like we just ignored the first 3 weeks. He's talking about it's Big Ten play now, and they need to obviously improve in a hurry.
Anything else you want to hit on what went wrong? We've got plenty of other poor things to talk about as with some of the listener questions. But I
want to point out one stat. I want to make sure I get this right. I put this in the story, but it's just astounding to me that Alabama's wide receivers finished with 234 yards receiving after the catch. Wisconsin as an offense, 209 yards total. Alabama got 25 more yards from its receivers after the catch. So that tells you all you need to know.
It absolutely does. It jumped out to me when I read your story. That number certainly jumped out to me. And when you looked at what Ryan Williams did alone, I mean, that dude
is unreal.
That stop on a dime and let Jameer Latimer go right by him and take off for the touchdown. He did that in a much bigger game and a much more impressive. I think it was even more impressive last year when he did it against Georgia. And that play, I thought, jumped off the screen to me, the one that he did against Georgia last year, because he did it in full speed after catch. It was just insane. That one was impressive. The one at Georgia last year was a little bit more, but that dude is legit. And he still has to play another year of college football, which is insane. Him and Jeremiah Smith both. They both have another year. And Wisconsin will get to see Jeremiah Smith here in about a month. Ohio State comes to Camp Randall. All right, let's jump into some of these listener questions. We'll start with our guy Ryan. He says, more concerning, Wisconsin's pass defense or rush offense?
Rush offense all day long. I know it wasn't great against Alabama. Alabama also has one of the premier wide receivers in the country, as we just talked about.
All those
Playmakers
dudes are
everywhere.
legit.
Yeah. The run offense is a problem because you were having issues against Middle Tennessee. And here's the thing I was thinking about afterward is I don't know how you fix this issue right now. Who can you put in where all of a sudden you're going to magically be better? Again, you don't. We'll look back on this season 2 and say how impactful that Kevin Haywood ACL injury was. Again, I don't know how good they would have been, but you would have liked their chances a whole heck of a lot better because then they were forced to go to the transfer portal, get Davis Heinsohn. You didn't really know what you had because he had done it at the MAC level, but didn't have the length that a typical Big Ten tackle did and struggled immediately. And now you're having to adjust on the fly where you got these 4 new dudes in different spots, but Jake Renfro is hurt. I don't know how you can say, he's going to be healthy at any point the rest of this season. Again, that's speculative, but like when you're playing every week, how can you get better? So I don't know. I'm more concerned with that. And another reason I would be incredibly concerned about that is you just brought in a coordinator whose offense is predicated on reestablishing the physicality and identity, smash mouth football up front. If you can't do that, how can you do anything?
Yeah. I think it's a lot to ask, and it's the position that they're in for a number of reasons, but it's a lot to ask. You're throwing Emerson Mandel out there for his first start, second start at right tackle, first road start, and it's at Alabama against those dudes. Colin Cudberly making his first road start at Alabama against those dudes. You throw Ryan Corey in there after the injury. I personally would have rather – I think Jake Renfro played because he wanted to show toughness and show his team that he's not quitting and he doesn't want them to quit. To me, that's probably where his mindset was at because he was not healthy enough to play, I don't think. But I think it was more of a mentality thing than it was anything else. And because he's certainly hurt. I mean, that was clear. And Ryan Corey may have benefited from more snaps there, I think. But
yeah,
those 3 guys, and then obviously a dinged up Renfro, you're asking a lot of those guys. The left side of the line, I don't know that they were great, but they certainly weren't the problem.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this to blame redshirt freshmen who were thrown into this tremendously difficult spot because I think you and I both agree that there is a lot of talent there. But how often do you have multiple guys who are redshirt freshmen starting their first games having to do it at the same time against this level of competition? I do think something Riley Mallman said after the game was interesting because he was asked about some of the frustrations and the challenge that these young guys face. And he wanted to make it clear that he feels like there is a lot to like about their ability. But in this moment right now, part of the frustration is when you've got young players, he's talking about, maybe we need to work on their football IQ, or what really stands out is they're just processing things a little bit slower, which he's like, I was in that spot too. I mean, that same thing happened to me. But when you do that, all of a sudden you're not as explosive off the ball. You're behind on a play, and it can very quickly go in the wrong direction. And so maybe those things are obvious, but to have your leader of that group or one of them say that in moments of frustration at least helps you realize the challenge they face right now. Because no matter how good you are in high school, no matter how well you do in practice, when you've got to do it in this type of situation, it's so tough. I mean, think about there were those back-to-back sacks. The second one when Kadanko came in for one play, but before that, it almost looked like Alabama's edge guy knew exactly what was coming, went right around Emerson Mandel. He didn't really have a chance, and I don't even know if that was I don't know how much you put on Mandel or just the fact that this dude was reading exactly what was going to happen, but those things happen a whole hell of a lot quicker in that game than they do at any point in your life as an O-lineman.
Yeah, the protection wasn't where it needed to be. There was one of the sacks, just a missed stunt where Colin Cudberly is blocking his guy, and instead of passing him off to Mandel, he sticks with him, and the looping guy comes right through, and it's – I wouldn't say – but those are the things that young guys are – you would expect a guy in his second year or even late in his first year to be able to pick that up with – not with ease, but be able to pick it up. And they were struggling with that type of stuff. And it was a disaster for Danny O'Neil. And I feel like we haven't talked a ton about him. I'm sure we will here in a minute, but it certainly, with Billy Edwards' injury, Danny O'Neil's ability to get out of the pocket was was much needed.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean I'm excusing Wisconsin's pass defense because it was not good. I think Ricardo Hallman really struggled, and it's not like Wisconsin isn't about to face some teams with some dudes on the outside. We saw Middle Tennessee hit a couple big plays. Middle Tennessee that had just lost to an FCS team, and so they have to be a lot better on the outside. But since I had to pick, I think very clearly I'd go with the rush offense, but they need to be better, especially down the field, because you give up some of those explosives and big plays, and you're not going to give yourself much of a chance.
Look, we can talk about the run defense, and it was good. The ability to get after Ty Simpson was non-existent for the most part, and it's not like he was getting rid of the ball very, very quickly. He was holding it sometimes, and so that we can talk about how good the rush defense was fine. But they had 1 sack and 2 tackles for loss. Just did not make plays on the other side of the ball, and that certainly hurts. If you're not able to get after the quarterback, it's going to be a tough day for your secondary, and it was. I'm not giving them a pass, but it was a tough day for a number of reasons, largely because those guys were really freaking good.
Yeah, they made it too easy on Simpson. I mean, he had all day, and he's only making his 3rd career start. And I think that was something that the defense hoped it would be able to take advantage of. I mean, he's been around for a long time, but just too easy. Stand back there and sling it.
I mean, the dude went 17 for 17 against.
He did.
Monroe, right? He was not good against Florida State, but Marcus says the D looks good against the run. How did our offense get a running game going in camp, per reports, but can't during the season?
Well, they get a lot of snaps. I mean, the line was certainly different at that time. What do you got?
I would go with the idea that they didn't actually get tackled. So we have no idea. We have no idea if there were some big runs, but it's not like they weren't getting touched in those runs. So it's very possible they weren't actually getting out and getting 60, 70 yards on some of those big plays that we did mention at times. That plays a little bit of a role. And also, as you said, they are not the same line that we saw in camp. We knew Davis Heinzen was a problem in pass protection. I think he was better as a run blocker, but he was not good enough in pass protection. And that led to him being benched and a whole group having to move around. I do think they did themselves a pretty significant disservice by not practicing Riley Mahlman at left tackle at all, at least during the time that we got to see both in the spring and in fall camp. I think they did themselves an extreme disservice by not doing that at all, because now you're trying to learn on the run. And Riley has played good, fine there, right? But that was, I think, a misstep on their part, just because if you knew it was a possibility and it's the move that you made after the first game, you probably should have repped it during fall camp.
That's a reasonable take. And to your other point, I say all the time, we have no idea when a run in camp is 4 yards or 14 yards. And I would also say, I don't know how much to put on the running backs, these young running backs, because we're not there watching the whole, how big is it? What decision did they make or did they not make? But there have not been a lot of like creating something, making guys right when they're wrong. Guys are just getting hit and going down. And that needs to be better too.
Ben says, what does this team need to do to be competitive in these big games? And I think, quite honestly, it's something that we've been touching on here a little bit, being able to run the ball. Running the ball makes everything else so much better, and it keeps the other offense off the field. It drains a defense, and it gives your play action game that much better of an opportunity to succeed. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball.
And the other thing is, those openings for some of those sweeps and reverses, they close a heck of a lot quicker against Alabama. Like, they were trying, and you saw, was it Tretch early in the game? It's like, oh, that went for 4 yards, and that was kind of a big run for Wisconsin. So we talked about how you didn't necessarily like what you saw in week 2 from in between the tackles, but at least they were getting some things outside, and that's a huge part of the run game. They couldn't get that either because guys are so much quicker. So, I mean, Jeff Grimes has, and the rest of the staff, a lot to figure out, but that's the challenge you face as the competition gets more difficult, is like just because it works in week 2 doesn't mean you're going to be able to do that. I'm not even saying consistently, but occasionally, so you can open some things up.
Yeah. Badgers Bias asks, did our O-line and secondary regress from last year? And I would ask why, especially in the secondary.
I mean, they don't have Nazir Forkerine for starters. I know Ricardo Holman struggled, gave up a lot of big plays. Jameer Latimer, like we talked about, was out there in coverage when Ryan Williams, as he would with probably most DBs, makes them look silly. I don't know that I would say regressed. I mean, Preston Zachman had 2 interceptions early this season. I like Austin Brown back there. It's, to your point, very difficult when Simpson can just stand back there and have all day, and you have high-level wide receivers. I mean, we didn't even talk about Bernard, a great player. Scored on the run, which we also haven't mentioned. They went for it on 4th down again. I feel like once you go for it on 4th and 2 at your own 46, anytime it's 4th down and you have a reasonable striking distance, you're going to go for it. Was it 4th and 1 or something like that? And they got him to the edge and he scored the touchdown. So I don't feel like it's a regression necessarily. You're in a different situation, and not having Nazir is a big factor. Not that those guys haven't, like Emilio Agard, I think he's played well, but Forkerine, really good player.
Yes, that, and we'll get to another question about the secondary, but it was essentially what happened. You guys said it was the strength, and now it's not what happened. And I think, Nazir Forkerine's a big part of that. But Jameer Latimer also playing against those type of guys. On the touchdown to Bernard, the long touchdown, he went for the ball instead of the man. And instead of trying to, make the tackle so you don't get the explosive, instead of it being a 20-some-odd yard gain, it's a 40-some-odd yard gain. That type of stuff matters. That type of stuff is important. And it was, Ty Simpson put it right where he wanted to, caught him in stride, and it was just a great pass, and that's what you're going to get. But there were some opportunities for guys just to make the play so that it's not a long touchdown, and they didn't. And same thing with Ryan Williams' second touchdown, right? Where he stops on dime and you miss the tackle and he's in the end zone. There were opportunities for them to make plays, and they just didn't get it done. And certainly Hallman's a part of that as well.
Was it a question about regression for another position group as well?
We said, did the O-line regress? And I feel like, yes, I feel like we've kind of hit on that. BBB says, is running out the clock and not going for the backdoor cover the most fireable offense?
No. There are many more fireable offenses, like if you're Virginia Tech's coach and you get annihilated by Old Dominion.
Yes. Or if you're UCLA's coach and you get beaten by New Mexico, who has a coach that was mentioned a couple times in these replies because his name is Jason Eck. Jason Eck is a former Wisconsin Badger. Was at Idaho State or Idaho, and almost took Oregon down to the wire last year. And then obviously has gotten this new job at New Mexico and taking down UCLA. I don't know that that's a big win, like an impressive win. UCLA is a dumpster fire, and Deshaun Foster got fired because of it. But yes. Scott says, do you see a path to get to a bowl game?
So much talk about this after the game. I feel like, at least in my head, and maybe some of the other people down there. Do I see a path? Well, nothing has really changed. I mean, I looked at it and we talked about this. Wisconsin ought to end September 3-1. October is hellacious. Can you go 1-3? Can you beat Iowa? I don't know if it's realistic to think you can steal one of those other 3. I mean, Ohio State's number 1 in the country. Oregon is, now they got to play Penn State here coming up, but that's a top 4 team. You have to go on the road to Michigan. Can you get to November at 4-4? If you can do that, then I see the path forward. And that's not to say it's going to be easy, because Washington is playing good football. Indiana is playing good football. Illinois is a top 10 team, and Minnesota has had your number for a while. But I think if you're 4-4 going into November, you can see the path to 2-2 and a bowl game. So nothing in my mind has really changed. I said 6-6 before the season, and that felt like best case scenario. It kind of still does feel that way, but I see the path.
Richard says, overreaction or no, the level of coaching and performance by the players in the field has reached Don Morton era levels, even with substantially more available resources.
That to me is a massive overreaction. And again, this may sound like excuse making. We are in a completely different era, and what Wisconsin has in front of it is so much different. And I know, like, Don Morton went 6-27. They had, what was it, like 41 fumbles or something like that one year, over 100 in his tenure. I mean, a lot has been talked about that. I've certainly written about that, talked to Don Morton himself, who claims, of course, if he had a couple more years, perhaps he could have orchestrated a similar Barry Alvarez-like turnaround. But nonetheless, that's just a totally different situation, an absolute dumpster fire. And that's not excusing what Wisconsin has done here, but we're talking about Wisconsin teams that have made a bowl game, just missed a bowl game, and that is clearly a notch or two below what we came to expect in the 2010s. But no, it's, to me, not the same thing.
Wisconsin played 5 ranked teams in Don Morton's last year, 1989. It was the year that they went, I believe, 2-10. They lost 51-3 to number 3 Miami.
We scored first.
They did. Then 51 straight.
Yeah,
Michigan at Michigan, 24-0. At Illinois, 32-9. At Ohio State, 42-22. And at home to Michigan State, 31-3. In 1988, they lost to number 1 Miami, at number 1 Miami, 23-3, and Michigan 62-14. Those are the only 2 ranked teams they played that year. Their wins during Don Morton's final 2 years: Minnesota 14-7, Northwestern 35-31, and Toledo 23-10. That is the last 2 years of the Don Morton era. Now, again, we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. If they go 2-10, maybe this is a question that we can talk about again at the end of the year. At this point, I would say no. But anything less than a bowl game is, I would say, unacceptable on a year-to-year basis at Wisconsin. In 1988 or 89, they went to bowl games in the 80s. But if they had gotten anywhere close to 500, it would have been celebrated like it was a national championship, just because how bad they were in 87, 88, 89. And then obviously in 90 as well, when Barry came in, they were not very good that year either. So I don't know that it's reached that level yet. Question of the year, Sam says, when is it going to get better? I think a better question is it going to get better?
Man, that's such a hard question. I mean, that question is it going to get better under Luke Fickell? I mean, ever? That's a lot of years, and don't know what the landscape will look like, say, in a decade. But I do more and more wonder what the path forward is for Luke. And what do you have to do? Let's say they go 5-7 this year and don't go to a bowl. What would they have to do in year 4 to make you think it's worth continuing? The schedule will be a little bit different, but still have to play Notre Dame, still have to play Pitt. We don't know the order of the Big Ten games at this point. That might matter too. If you go 6-6 in year 4, is that enough? Is 7-5 enough? It's kind of, you start to really parse it out, and maybe does one game make the difference? It's just, when you have an AD who's coming in saying we want to compete for championships, and you're setting that standard and you're nowhere close to it, certainly at some point you probably have to adjust your expectations, I would think. But I don't know what Luke needs to achieve to continue doing it long term, but it's not going to be easy.
I think it's all measured against how much you're willing to pay him to go somewhere else, right? Like, that is essentially what it is. So if you win 5 games this year, there's not a chance in hell he's getting fired. I could look very stupid. I do on a regular basis. But I would be floored, shocked if there's somebody and someone to come along, however much it would have to be, to get him, to have him not be here next year. I don't see that happening with the amount of money that he's owed. So see if you can. I think Chris McIntosh still has to support him. The bigger question is, would you allow Chris McIntosh to make another hire after that? I feel like it would have to be I feel like it would have to be something, a more collaborative group. But again, when we go back to the hire, no one was hating on it. There were people that probably would have rather have had Jim Leonard for sure, but no one was hating it. It was a home run hire. So the fact that it hasn't worked out for a variety of reasons is what we're dealing with now. But that said, overreaction or no, Darian Dupree should be getting more touches than Dylan Jones.
Overreaction. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen a lot from either one of them. I'm not going to say definitively Dylan needs X number of touches and it should be a certain amount more than Darian. If Devin Spalding wants to go with Dupree, fine. Find someone who can create a spark. I don't know that either one of them has had very much success to date.
Yeah, 17 carries, 72 yards for those guys on Saturday against Alabama. So it was over 4 yards a carry, barely.
You know what's interesting? This includes sacks. I put this in the story. But Wisconsin right now through 3 games is averaging 3.8 yards per carry. And a year ago, when it was not good, it was 4.4 yards a carry. And what did we say? I think now I can't remember if we were just talking about the running backs or as a team, but it was like if you could get to 5.5, that's what Kansas averaged as a team. You'd feel really good. So again, some of those are sacks. Doesn't help when you lose 19 yards on a bad snap, but it all starts to add up. 3.8 yards a carry so far. And it's not just Alabama. You played Miami, Ohio. You played Middle Tennessee. And so that has to get better.
BVB says, was passing on Bo Pribula the biggest fumble of the Fickell era?
I'm not going to hate on this move either, though obviously you would like to have a quarterback of that caliber and like to have a healthy starting quarterback. Sometimes timing matters. You know, Billy Edwards Jr. was in here very early. He ended up going to Virginia. He's from Virginia. Virginia very quickly got a quarterback. He had to make a decision in the portal. You cannot afford to wait on people, even though I know Bo did say in that interview that he was going to go to Wisconsin. I don't know that you can turn down somebody who's been a Big Ten starter in the hopes that you get this other guy. So, yeah, in hindsight, you've got one quarterback who's injured. It's your third straight starting quarterback who's injured and another guy who's playing well. But the biggest fumble, I think there's been some other ones that have been fumbled pretty significantly.
Yeah. I guess I would be referring to personnel, but we talked about this. Billy Edwards Jr. had more attempts in one game than Bo Pribula had in his career at one point, right? I think we went through that. It was like 50-something, and Billy had a game where he threw it that many times. So you were looking at there, who knew exactly what it was. But yes, the way that Bo Pribula looks against some teams that are not great by any stretch, but also Wisconsin has played some of these teams, but he's got 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. His passer rating is 180 something. His completion percentage is high 70s. He has looked the part, and he also has that added running ability. Had a couple of touchdowns in their opener, and now, but he didn't even win the job coming out of spring or coming out of fall camp. They were splitting time with the other guy who ended up getting hurt very early and is going to be out for the season. But it's not like he was apparently lighting it up in practice to the point where he was going to be the guy. And when they face perhaps maybe some tougher defenses, we'll see exactly what Bo looks like. But I certainly think when you look back at it now, yeah, because Bo Pribula he's healthy and Billy Edwards Jr. is not. And that is something we also probably should have mentioned and need to continue to mention when we talk about Luke Fickell. The dude's been snake bitten by quarterback injuries. I don't think that we can sit here and I'm not going to give him excuses at all, because his defense still gave up what they gave up. And last year, his defense could still not stop the run. But not having Tanner Mordecai for an extended period, not having Tyler Van Dyke for the final 10 games of last year, essentially, and then not having Billy Edwards Jr. past the third quarter or the second quarter of the first game of the year. Like, this is, it's insane, right? I mean, let's just be fair. It's insane that he's had this many quarterback injuries to deal with. And I certainly felt like when you go and look at the play that Danny O'Neal had Vinny Anthony streaking wide open by it was a double move. streaking open by like 5 yards, which is might as well be 20 when it's Alabama, and he underthrows him. I think Bill Edwards, he may overthrow him, but he ain't going to underthrow him. And that should have been a touchdown. And it wasn't, because Danny O'Neal, while he does a ton of great things, he doesn't have the same type of arm that Billy Edwards Jr. does. And some of the throws that he made or can make would have been useful on Saturday for sure. And that's what they're missing right now. And we'll see when he is able to come back. But I will say, Danny was a gamer, and he is a gamer. There's no doubt about it. He's tough as hell, and he's going to give you some nice plays. But they need a guy who can throw the ball down the field. And I don't know that necessarily is Danny right now. That 41-yarder to Jaden Ballard was great. But he had Vinny Anthony streaking wide open. It should have been a touchdown.
I also think any conversation with Bo and Billy it's not fair, because I don't know what Billy would have given this team. So he's played 2 full series. That's it. So, Danny was fantastic in week 2 against Middle Tennessee, and it would have taken a Herculean performance from any quarterback for Wisconsin to have a chance against Alabama, and maybe it wouldn't have been great for Billy, but we don't know. He's played 2 series. So the other thing, and I think this is worth mentioning, we're going to talk to Luke Fickell in a bit, though I can't imagine there's going to be some definitive update. What is the status of Billy Edwards Jr. moving forward? I have a hard time, and this is just me, picturing him playing against Maryland this week. I mean, you watch him throw in pregame warmups. He's got this big brace on, and I don't know how close to 100% he would be. And I also don't know, do you want to throw him out there given the situation with the offensive line? How mobile would he be? Do you feel like, well, if you can just get through that game, you have a bye week, put him in position to potentially play against Michigan, because you're going to want him in October, but you also can't control how quickly he gets healthy. I'd be surprised if we see him at this point against Maryland, unless he makes a very quick recovery.
I think he's continued to say in a couple of interviews that later in the season, at some point. And I guess any week is later than right now, but that feels like something that's going to be next month. And they play obviously the 20th. They don't play the 27th. They don't play again until the first week of October. So that's a pretty good stretch where he could, you would hope, continue to get healthy and have an opportunity to play in that game. But you're right, they do need him. And I think, quite honestly, that Luke Fickell and Jeff Grimes and everybody else deserve to have an opportunity to show what they can be with their starting quarterback at some point, which just hasn't happened. Chris says, what's your take on Fickell's ability to motivate the team? Barry's teams played with an edge, and they would be spitting nails in a game like this. Every time we see Fickell on the sideline, he looks like a deer in headlights. I will also say that I think Brett Bielema, when he was here, and Paul Chryst to an extent when he was here, looked like a deer in headlights when you looked at him on the sideline. Brett was always mouth wide open, mouth breathing, and Paul just always had not a glaze, but he was just always thinking, and like there was so. It's tough, but either way, what's your take on that? Do you think he's a good motivator?
I think this is a hard one to answer because we're not there every day. And so I don't know what's said. Again, I do think it's interesting that he's changing his tack after the game, because I think he's pushed them very hard. And now he's saying, I want to stay positive and be a little bit more upbeat. I don't know that it's a lack of motivation. I know we certainly hear and see some of these videos posted in the offseason of the things he's telling the team and the talking points. I mean, I know he was surprised when he got here about where things were as a program. He talked about leadership. That also came from the coaching staff, that it needed to be better. But at a certain point, you need the right players and you need the right schemes. I don't think it's a group of players who aren't willing to try hard for their head coach. I think it's a lot of other things. So I'm not going to sit here and say he doesn't do a good enough job of motivating them. I don't think that's really fair.
Jeff says, overreaction or no, this is way worse than a normal, it was never going to be easy loss at Alabama. Remember, already a blueprint from 2 weeks ago, how to compete against Alabama, gave up 31 points and lost by 2 touchdowns to an unranked team. That unranked team might be very good. That unranked team had the ability to run the ball and had the ability to get after the quarterback. I think that's as simple as it is. That doesn't make it better for Wisconsin. I'm just saying, if you were looking for a blueprint, the ability to run the ball was the blueprint, and they could not run the ball.
Is the statement here that it's way worse than the expected outcome?
Yes.
No.
That's an overreaction.
Yeah, it's frustrating and it's disappointing for Wisconsin and its fans because you just want reason for optimism. You want to have some semblance of hope when these guys talk about the product on the field last year. Like, I remember Aaron Witt talking about this in fall camp. That's not Wisconsin football. And he said, I promised Alec James at a certain point, like, as long as I'm here, this W is going to mean something. To me, that's what it is. The W means something because even when Wisconsin didn't win games in the last decade or so, you felt like they were in it late. And that's why there were so many gut-wrenching heartbreakers. But to just not even give yourself a chance is what's hardest to swallow. But the totality of the outcome is not any different, really, from what we anticipated. It's just how you got there.
Tim says, overreaction or no, defund the football program, bring back baseball.
Mild overreaction.
Okay. All right. Overreaction or no? Again, people are, I think, starting to figure this out, that I will answer all the overreaction or no ones. Fickell is not that good of a coach. Outside of chomping gum or on the sideline and wearing a team vest, what specifically does he do well?
I'm going to say that's an overreaction. You know, what's interesting is I want to say it was a Yahoo. I saw a story from after the weekend talking about kind of like, I don't know what it was, like headset, not hot seat, but basically coaches who are not doing themselves any favors. Did you see that?
I didn't see it.
And it said something to the effect of, like, Luke Fickell was, and I'm paraphrasing, lucky that Desmond Ridder turned out to be the quarterback that he was because he was a 2-star guy. And that's why in part he had success. I don't think that's fair, because look at the Cincinnati team that went to the playoff. You had dudes on both sides of the ball who were NFL draft picks. So that takes development. But
I was going to say, lucky turning a 2-star quarterback into a draft pick. Yeah, that
I mean,
seems
a ridiculous take. I'm just pointing out that's something I read this weekend. I do think, though, and I said this before, the farther away you get from that Cincinnati stuff, the less relevant it becomes, because what have you done at this level? So to date, not a single win of consequence.
Yeah. I think it's also worthwhile to note that some of the offensive staff that was at Cincinnati that had a lot to do with that success are now, I believe the offensive coordinator is now at Notre Dame. We know that wide receiver coach is at Notre Dame. We know the tight end coach is there as well. So there were a lot of guys that had a role in building those guys up and making them into the players that they are not currently on Wisconsin staff. So I will acknowledge that as well. The one thing I've taken from this game, says Frank, the defense might be able to slow the Iowa offense this year.
Well, if I was just going to run the ball, they damn well better.
Thoughts on Pat Fitzgerald, is Randy asking.
Oh, man.
I don't know, dude. Yep, we're at that point. Derek says, is this a better team than last year at this time? I still say yes.
I think so. That's small.
What makes you think that? Like, where are they better now than they were last year?
Well, this is tough because we're 3 games in and we're coming off the Alabama game. I mean, they got their butts kicked a year ago. I know that Tyler went down with the ACL injury. Where are they better? I mean, I still think defensively they're better. Now, you don't feel great about that after what they did in the pass defense. And it's just hard because of the O-line. The O-line messes everything up right now in terms of trying to make these comparisons, because when you've got these injuries, and Wisconsin was fortunate, as Luke has said, for the first 2 years to really be able to go with the same line, you don't have that this year, and that makes it so much harder. It's negligible maybe on the field, but I do think this is the best of the 3 teams they've had. It just doesn't say very much.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Overreaction or no, Mike Trussell is incapable of having both a good run defense and pass defense at the same time.
I'll say it's an overreaction right now. I know they hadn't really been tested a ton through the first 2 games, but at least they put something on film. Let's have this conversation in 9 more games.
All right. I think that will do it. There are some that I didn't get to that maybe I'll get to on the next show. But Wisconsin is getting ready for a visit from Maryland coming up on Saturday. They are an 8.5-point favorite. I feel like this is going to be the last game they're favored in. Perhaps.
It's quite possible.
We'll see where Washington is when they come here, and we'll see what Minnesota looks like once we get to the end of the season, but not great. I mean, maybe we'll see where Iowa's at as well. They haven't looked overly impressive either. So maybe Wisconsin goes out, bounces back, and has a great game on Saturday against Maryland, and you're feeling better about it going into the brutal stretch that is the month of October. But we'll see. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is. Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.